In the final regular season game of the season for the Bucks, we had the Pat Connaughton game with a 43-point double-double. PC actually put himself into some rarefied Bucks air today. We'll discuss PC's career day and more on the other side of the intro.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What to do? Welcome to Locked On Bucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Camille Davis, NBA analyst with the Locked On Network and co-host of the Technical Foul podcast. Joining me is Frank Madden, longtime voice of the pod, founder of brewhoop.com. And we appreciate you for tuning in and making Locked On Bucks your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, as well as on YouTube and in newsletter form. Head over to lockedondaily.com and sign up for the free Locked On Bucks daily newsletter. You'll get Bucks news plus league coverage delivered right to your inbox. So head over to lockedondaily.com and sign up for that if you have not yet already. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when that first $5 bet wins. Frank, I don't know what you were expecting heading into this final game of the year with the fifth seed locked up, nothing really to play for, all of the main guys for the Bucks sitting, because I didn't know what to expect myself. And I was fully prepared to be like, I mean, it's not much you take from a game like this. But then Pat Connaughton happened. 43 points, a career high, 11 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals. With that stat line, Pat Connington joined Giannis Antetokounmpo, Chris Middleton, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as the only Bucks with a 40-10-5 game. And honestly, with the way that the season has gone, with Pat Connaughton falling out of the rotation and thinking back just to the championship run, the good feelings about Pat there and seeing how his role has diminished this year, not saying it was diminished wrongfully or anything like that, but the role has changed for him. But he's been a pro the entire time, no matter what's been asked of him this season. So to see him have this type of game, a career night for him, I thought that was kind of special, a special way to end the season.
Yeah, I mean, there's these games where the starters are rested. I mean, the whole basic rotation practically was rested, aside from AJ Green and Kuzma, and obviously we didn't see tons of them, right? Kuz only played the first quarter and then was in his street clothes by the end of it. There's always something fun about these games, right? Because the expectations are obviously totally different. In this case, obviously having locked up the 5 seed on Friday, we knew the vibes were going to be better regardless, because this was, kind of the last hurrah of the season. Obviously like fans who are expecting to see a potential, meaningful game were obviously left with something very different. But I mean, okay, I'm not going to say like people who, if they flew from, other countries to see Giannis, got what they paid for. But if you're like a regularly attending like Bucks fan who, this wasn't the only game you were going to see, I think you got your money's worth. I thought that was a really fun game. And, we talked about post game Friday, Justin and I talked about how, that game in Detroit was a really well played basketball game. And I was impressed with really both teams coming out and playing at a high level. I think certainly the offenses were operating at a very high level on Friday. This game obviously is very much sliding scale. You don't expect these teams to come out like locked in defensively, when you have a bunch of guys who are playing for contracts, playing for, attention in, with their current team or potentially in free agency, guys trying to make their case for, NBA contracts, right? Think about it like Jamari Bouye and, two-way guys like that. But it ended up being a really fun game, probably more dramatic than the coaching staff would have liked, especially given Doc was very open, literally telling, in the interviews in the fourth quarter with ESPN that he was trying to get to watch the Masters, and that was delayed due to the overtime.
The surprising overtime. I thought they had that in the bag.
Yeah, I mean, to give up an 8-point lead in what was it, 15 seconds or something? I mean, that was absurd. If that happened, in a meaningful game, we would just be losing our minds. But hey, it set up what it did. I think did Pat score 10 points, I think, in the overtime?
I think
I thought
so.
he had 33. So whatever it needed to get Pat Connaughton to not just a career night, but an historic night. I mean,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, his career highs coming into this game, 41 minutes played. The most shots he'd ever taken, I think, in an NBA game was 15. He
Well,
took
you do well.
29 shots
Yeah.
tonight. The most points he ever scored in a Milwaukee uniform was 23. It was in a game against the Knicks a few years ago. He hit 7 of 13 threes and 1 2-pointer to score 23 points in like 30 some minutes. So this just obliterated, any semblance of a career night for Pat. And he came out with those 13 points in the first quarter and wasn't even the story for the Bucks. I mean, Kyle Kuzma was
His first
having
quarter was
an
crazy.
out-of-body experience shooting threes, including, multiple heat checks. And I don't know how far out his last three was in that final minute, but for him to pile up 22 points in a full quarter and then just sit out the rest of the game was pretty hilarious.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, Camille, I was at least thinking, like, what could Kyle Kuzma have done if he had continued to play
With the game plan dedicated, like get Kyle the ball, let him shoot. That's the game plan.
Exactly. So yeah, it was a really entertaining game. I mean, let's talk more about Pat for sure.
Yeah.
For the reasons you mentioned, what he's meant to this franchise. One of the few carryovers from the title-winning team. For him to get his flowers and be rewarded for a season where he fell out of the rotation early. As you said, I mean, they had to do something when they had the slow start. I think everyone agreed it was the right move to like give younger guys a look. But it felt like whenever, they randomly were down multiple guys and they needed Pat to be ready to play, he popped up. And again, like, he obviously didn't do enough to like reclaim a rotational spot. His 3-point shot like never fully came around this season until today. But I think his professionalism and, the kind of teammate that he is, I think he had to feel, really impressed with just kind of him being, staying ready. And then, I think of games like the first game in Miami where Giannis was out and they made a ton of shots and, held on at the very end. Pat made big plays, multiple blocks, offensive rebounds, like doing lots of stuff. And he popped up and did that kind of throughout the season. So I thought this was, a cool capper. And, I mentioned on Twitter, like, we don't know what's going to happen with Pat this summer.
Very true.
He has a player option, which he'll certainly pick up at $9.4 million. But, again, depending on kind of where the Bucks are, like, he could be a guy that gets stretched to save $6 million and open up additional flexibility under the aprons. And you just don't know. Or obviously aggregated in a trade or something like that. So who knows kind of where Pat's long-term future is, but certainly if this was the last regular season game for Pat Connaughton in Milwaukee, I mean, no one could have, this was, last Kobe game, like level of like crazy outlier type of performance. So shout out to Pat. This was his day and, a very strange Bucks season.
Truly.
Ending on a high, but in a very weird high, but maybe that's the most fitting way to end it.
Yeah, I mean, when you do something and it puts you in the record books and Bucks franchise history next to Giannis and Chris and Kareem, like, the type of night that you had there. So I love that Pat Connaughton's name's going to be up there because people will look back at this and be like, okay, Kareem, yeah. Okay, Giannis, yeah, for sure. Chris, and like, Pat Connaughton, like what happened in this game? And it's like, you had to be there, that 82nd game of the 2024-25 regular season. But the cool thing with me in seeing Pat get his flowers today, too, is just seeing how his teammates, like, they were so hyped for PC throughout the game. Even when he's getting MVP chance from Fiserv Forum and they cut to the bench, you see Giannis kind of looking around like, not him getting my chance. But just the love that they had. And it's been a rough season at patches for this Bucks team, and they stayed together. And now they head into the playoffs on an 8-game win streak. So before we talk a bit more about the playoffs and the energy and momentum that the Bucks have carried over or can carry over after the way the season has ended, I do want to give some love to some of the other guys who had some career nights for the Bucks. So we'll talk about them right after this. I am a huge fan of Prize Picks, and with baseball season being in full swing now too, There is no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks. It is the best place for daily fantasy sports because with Prize Picks, you pick more or less than on 2 different player projections, at least 2. And if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash, whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, first inning runs. Prize Picks keeps every game exciting. It's fast and simple, so setting a lineup takes less than 60 seconds. And when you win, that payout is quick, safe, and secure. I personally always take advantage of Taco Tuesday, where Prize Picks offers discounts on select player projections for even more value. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's the code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Spring is here, and that means it's home project season. So whether you're refreshing a room or you're tackling a full renovation, Wayfair is the best kept secret for all things home improvement. From small updates like stylish cabinet hardware to major upgrades like new vanities, sinks, or outdoor lighting, Wayfair has quality products for every single budget. Personally, we just recently upgraded our bedroom with Wayfair, and the selection was incredible. Love the free and fast shipping. It made the process even easier because there was no hauling heavy items from the store. The shipping was seamless, the shopping was seamless, and I found exactly what I was needing to fit my space and style. Wayfair makes home improvement easy. So get started at wayfair.com. That's Wayfair, WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Had to start with Pat Connaughton on the show today because, I mean, we just mentioned why 43-point triple-double for him, but there were some other Bucks that had career nights, and I want to take some time to talk about some of the, we'll call them the lesser seen Bucks, the end of the bench guys who were able to flash in this game because the playoffs are coming up. We'll spend the next week, of course, talking about Pacers and Bucks and the matchups. And we probably won't talk about most of these guys, hopefully, because if we are, something went terribly wrong. But we probably won't be talking about most of these guys until the offseason. So of some of the other guys who you got to see play tonight in game 82, who stood out to you? Because, I mean, Tyler Smith had a career high in points. Pete Nance had a career high in points. Bouye had a career high in points. Like, there were some interesting prospects tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the 2 guys that we've seen the least just because of when they were signed, Pete Nance and Jamari Bouye, kind of jumped out just because, again, we don't know if we'll talk about them next year because who knows if they'll be around. Yeah. So this is maybe the only chance that we're going to talk about them in actual gameplay. I think you look at the stats. I mean, first off, Jamari Bouye played 47 minutes, not quite Tim Frazier 2019 or whenever that the year was of the Tim Frazier 53-minute game in Atlanta. Yeah. I looked it up, by the way, Camille. I was actually thinking about the Pat Connaughton thing had me thinking of like the most like random statistically monstrous games from Bucks that I can recall. And I always think back to that Atlanta game where the Bucks rested basically everyone. I think Brooke actually played in that game because, Brooke
always plays.
doesn't rest or whatever. He did rest today, but Frazier had 20 points and 15 assists in that game. I think he had 8 rebounds, so he didn't have a triple-double. But, 53 minutes, like you play enough minutes, you're going to accumulate some stats. But I thought Jamari Bouye, I mean, you saw the quickness, I think, multiple times. Yeah. He's really athletic, getting to the rim, driving to his right, got to the rim for multiple finishes. There's some 3-point shooting, but he's didn't strike me as a guy who's like, like, oh, you give him a whisper of daylight and he's like pulling up from 3. Like he wasn't that aggressive looking for a shot. He did have 5 turnovers, which, again, I think speaks to the fact that it's not like he's some super pure, point guard, lead guard type guy. But he did have, I think, a couple blocks, including that one, which was originally called a foul when he went up. And I think he got Simone Fontecchio, who, okay, not like a, Skywalker, rim rocking type of player, but I mean, Fontecchio was like, I think 6'8", 6'9". Yeah. He's a big dude, and he's certainly much taller than Jamari Bouye, and he got stuffed at the rim, and Doc challenged it and had it overturned. So yeah, I mean, he was a really productive G Leaguer before the Bucks got him on the 2-way. Again, like sure, like bring him back for summer league. Let's see, maybe there's, something there that maybe kind of evolves from it. But, obviously I'm not going to look at him as a guy who's like, oh, he's the next guy in the
Right.
string of guys that we've seen come through that two-way pipeline, which like actually is a thing now.
It's a thing for the Bucks.
Between AJ Green and Ryan Rollins. I mean, Bucks backcourt is actually like been helped a ton by the two-way spots. So respect to Jamari Bouye. And then I think Pete Nance, just looked like very comfortable, very competent as like that dribble handoff guy, big man, who can, clearly was comfortable popping those threes. And ironically, like Pete Nance basically hadn't really played much in the NBA at all. And then we saw him play against the Bucks with the Sixers, whatever that was, like a month ago or something like that, like maybe 6 weeks ago, in that Sunday afternoon game that the Bucks won when Giannis was out.
Yep.
And he looked kind of like the guy that we saw today. And I remember thinking like, oh, this guy, like, Larry Nance's brother, right?
See the name, you're like,
Larry Nance's Jr.'s brother, Larry Nance's senior son. He clearly does not have the athleticism of his brother or dad, but he has a skill level that, I think was pretty apparent right away. And for him, I think to put up the number that either was 19 points and you have like 5 or 6 assists or something like that. I mean,
5, yeah.
I think a couple blocks too, maybe. Again, not like a really athletic guy, but I think you saw like why, he made sense as a flyer two-way guy because, again, if you're in a spot where you need some big depth, if they had Pete Nance when they went on that West Coast road trip when Bobby was out following his grandmother's passing, Pete Nance actually could have been kind of useful, not that he's like some huge like monster rebounder, but just, some size with some offensive skills, could be useful. So yeah, I think both those guys, again, like they played a ton. So they were going to put up some stats, but they looked pretty effective. And certainly I think have done enough in this short little cameo here at the end of the year that, I'd be interested in kind of bringing them back on two ways next year. Obviously Rollins has graduated from his role as a two-way guy. And so, yeah, send him to Vegas. We'll see. Maybe you can develop something with either of those guys and, maybe they become pieces that could do something next year.
Yeah, they possibly could. And thinking of someone else who stood out to me was Tyler Smith. You mentioned Vegas. I can't wait to see what his summer league looks like next year as well, because this last game, like we haven't seen a lot of Tyler Smith, but this was the most comfortable I've seen him on an NBA floor. He was knocking down his shots. We heard so much about just the way that he's able to shoot the rock at the size that he is. It's like it's a very real skill set for him. So seeing him connect 4 or 6 from 3, 6 and 9 from the field, it was a pleasant surprise. Like the kid can shoot. He has a nice form. He doesn't hesitate, and that's a real skill set. So he's someone I'm also looking forward to, like over the summer and seeing the growth there. Especially now, he's the only rookie that we got this year left. So Tyler Smith, a stretch big, is always a very, very useful skill set to have. So did enjoy seeing Smitty get 30 minutes tonight in this game and getting some run and looking good during his time on the court. I was very pleasantly surprised with Smitty tonight.
Yeah, I think certainly with him, the shot was always like the story, right? And there's something about like a lefty, when a lefty can shoot, it always looks prettier to me than when a righty can shoot. And he looked very comfortable today. But, we've seen sort of stretches from him, whether it was in Vegas, whether it was even sort of some random looks that he got during the season. The jumper, I think everybody expects that can be a consistent weapon for him. I think can he do – I'm probably less a concern about the rest of his offensive game. I think there is upside that he could become a potentially like somewhat dynamic offensive player. I think he's shown some ability to finish around the basket. There's a smoothness to his game. Not that he's like going to be like a massive shot creator on his own, but he's definitely a very comfortable stretch shooter. Does not need to be like wide open to take shots. You give him a little bit of daylight, he will put it up. And so I think really the question with him is just like, defensively, what does his evolution look like? And, can he get to the point where, he's strong enough that he can rebound and box out to the level that you need, right? Which I think we all got an appreciation for at various points this season when they were short on bigs. Like,
Absolutely.
You can't just throw anybody out there and say like, just box out. You actually have to show that you can play the big position at the NBA level. And then, can he read the game, understand the game, position himself in a way? Not that he's ever going to be like a big time shot blocker, rim protector guy, but if he's mainly a 4, then he doesn't necessarily have to be super dynamic in that regard. But again, that was like the big question, kind of knock on him coming in the NBA was like, can he defend at a high enough level? So look, nothing I saw today like is going to make me feel one way or the other about it, honestly. So that's just kind of something that is going to be on his radar, and certainly not that you can become a better defensive player just by putting in hours by yourself with a trainer in the gym. But hopefully we see maybe a little bit of signs of that in Vegas, and obviously a lot of that probably gets at like physical maturity as well, given his age. Can he continue to bulk up and physically get stronger, in addition to obviously just getting smarter and more mature and having the game slow down for him on defense. So yeah, he's kind of, to me, sort of I don't say a lottery ticket, that maybe he's overstating a little, but he's a flyer that you have. And I don't know, it's nice, Camille, that like we don't have to be like always completely pessimistic about Bucks prospects anymore. Like we can actually have some faith that they can pick young guys that may actually figure stuff out and develop them into useful players, given what we've seen. So yeah, I mean, I expect he'll be on the roster. I think not that like this game was like the referendum on Chris Livingston necessarily one way or the other. But I certainly, like with Chris, even though he put up some numbers in Vegas last year, I just kind of struggled. My thing with Chris is I just sort of like have struggled to see like positionally, like what is he? What is he? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like what is he at the NBA level? I just don't know that he has like the ball skill. I don't think he has the ball skill to be a 3. And so then if you're a 4, it's some of the same questions that, we have about Tyler Smith in terms of just like what are you doing enough defensively? I think Chris is like
he's smaller.
He's smaller. That's the problem. He's a high motor guy, but he's 6'6", 6'7", decent wingspan. He's strong, but it still feels like he's undersized if he's playing the 4. And he's always like working hard, so I don't think you worry about that part of it. But again, just being like a 6'6", 6'7" guy who works hard, like that doesn't necessarily get you all that far in the NBA. So he's definitely a guy like his first 2 years are guaranteed. I think he's not guaranteed like next year as far as his contract goes. When you think about just a potential roster crunch, he's definitely a guy. I don't know that he sticks around. Obviously the Bucks have invested a fair amount in him, but I mean, like I thought, I was a little surprised, honestly. Like I thought Ajax was talking about more young guys. Obviously Ajax was the one young guy. We felt like coming into this year, along with AJ Green, we're kind of like the
in front of the line, pretty much.
Exactly, the kind of breakout candidates. And Ajax obviously was the guy who got the most visibility when he was starting for that extended period. But the starting lineup was generally not effective when he was in there. And I thought today, like again, it's not like a referendum on Ajax, like this one game.
Yeah, it's just one game.
But like, man, just some of the stuff, it's like
the decisions at times.
It's the decision making, exactly.
Yeah.
And I thought I was mad that Ajax was even in the game over. I mean, I'm not like a big Chris Livingston believer, but I was when Ajax did not like try to get the ball on that late fourth quarter play. Like he just
surprisingly little effort from a guy who's supposed to be like an effort guy.
Yeah, like just didn't come to the ball.
Yeah,
gets stolen. That sets up, eventually the tying 3. I was honestly surprised he didn't get benched for that, like because kind of all game long he has that like kind of weird, like kind of casualness and like it's like he's like in the open run at a gym on offense, like the way he like dribbles, like he's got sort of a nonchalantness to him, and then he like fires these like laser beam passes that like guys can't handle because they're a little bit off and they're coming at a billion miles an hour. So I don't know, like I'm not if I was like buying stock, selling stock, I would say looking ahead to next year, I would I mean at this point, like do I even need to say that I'm buying stock in AJ Green? Like probably not, but AJ, Ryan Rollins, and obviously I expect they'll keep Ryan Rollins, restricted free agent. Kevin Porter, I think they have the chance to keep him. He obviously showed a lot, and he's a bit well, I shouldn't say he's younger than AJ, but
Yeah.
he's going to turn 25 in May, so he's not that young. But yeah, I'm definitely way more, optimistic about some guys,
Same.
and I think with Ajax and Chris, I'm kind of having a harder time, like just given the types of players they are and like what more about what they don't do and they can't do.
Mhm.
Having some skepticism about how eventually like what kind of path they have to
Going forward.
being
Yeah.
kind of like guys that fit in, especially on a team with at least what currently is built around, Giannis and Dame, right? Which obviously the shooting in particular, not even so the shooting so much. Honestly, the shooting is like the least of Ajax's problems. He hit another three today. Like he's been shockingly competent at 3-point shooting. It's just like the
Yeah.
decision making and everything else
It has
offensively.
to continue to improve for him. He's someone
Exactly.
I keep saying, like, the off season for Ajax is going to be a really big one for him. Like, going into this next year, it's going to be huge for Andre Jackson Jr., but yeah, there's gonna be more time to continue talking about these guys, not before the playoffs, but wanting to make sure that we at least give them some shine because in game 82 with no stakes, like these are the guys who get the playing time and they showed a little something. So want to wrap up here talking a bit about just this season and if your preseason expectations met what the reality of the 2024-2025 season was. So we'll talk a bit more about that after this. I am a huge fan of FanDuel as well. I love daily fantasy. All right. And the NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. So, right now, if you join FanDuel and you place that first $5 bet, you will get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. And I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy. So whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props, they have all those options from three-pointers to steals to assists. FanDuel has so many different ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same game parlay for a chance to win big. So don't miss out. Head to fanduel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. The Milwaukee Bucks with this overtime win against the Detroit Pistons here, that meant they got an 8-game winning streak to close out the season here. That is the longest winning streak of the season for the Bucks here. They end the season with the 48-34 record. And I just wanted to know, like, based on what you expected of the Bucks before the season started, how do you view this regular season? Because I had high hopes for this Bucks team, thinking they could be a championship contender. Uh, they got off to a really, really slow start this year. But I did see Justin post this on Twitter. He mentioned the fact that since that 2-8 start, the Bucks have like the 5th most wins in the league, the 9th best offensive rating, the 10th best defensive rating, and the 10th best net rating in the league. Slow start dug themselves into a hole they had to dig out of, and they had times throughout the season of inconsistency. But to see them starting to click as the season ends is just sharp contrast to how last season ended when they kind of limped into the playoffs. Like last year, they went 3-8 over their last 11. This year, they went 8-3 over their last 11. And for me, it's like the season from the beginning, I knew like it probably won't hit the highs I thought that it could hit. But I feel like they have pretty good momentum heading into the playoffs. But overall, the regular season did not go exactly the way I thought that it would.
Yeah, I mean, I think winning 48 games and being the 5 seed, not having home court, in any round, it is definitely a disappointment
Yep.
relative to, I think what you would have wanted to see coming into the year. And then even more importantly than that, the fact that, barring a minor miracle, right? Like you're going to start the playoffs without Dame.
Mm-hmm.
And so the whole goal that, Justin and I talked about on Friday, right? Like the whole goal, right? Seeding, all that other stuff aside, like the whole goal was get to the playoffs with your best players available. And, unfortunately, once again, like it's looking as though you're not going to be in a position to be able to put your best foot forward, which is, really disappointing. But by the same token, I think that's what made this 8-game winning streak like such a hard to parse sort of thing in terms of like what it meant. Because on the one hand, like it's been awesome, like seeing this team with all the negative energy that surrounded it and all the kind of like disappointment, and we were all ready to basically, 8 games ago to say like, man, what a, I don't know about failure of a regular season, but like what a disappointing regular season that, maybe is the, the continued descent of this team into non-contention / the questions about how long Giannis, Dame, and this core like is even that you can even keep it together, or that you even should keep it together, right? I think when Dame arrived, I think we all said like this is probably a 2-year window. When you look at especially Dame's age at the time, Chris's age, Brooke Lopez's age, right? It felt like we probably got 2 years, and if you don't, really kind of make your run during that period, then
got to reevaluate.
Who knows where you're going to be? Yeah, at the end of 25. And so the fact that we're sitting here saying, you're going to go into this first round series, you don't know what Dame's status is going to be. Obviously, Chris is gone. Kuzma.
Yeah, I wouldn't have expected that. If you told me before the season that we have Kyle Kuzma instead of Chris Middleton, I'd be like, wait, what? What happened?
Yeah, exactly. Now, other than that, health-wise, you're in a good spot. And, also nobody would have believed you if you told us before the season that like, oh, like Ryan Rollins and Kevin Porter Jr. would be like these late season revelations at the point guard spot in Dame's absence. And, that we'd be having this optimism about young players that we have. So it's just like really difficult to kind of, for me to kind of make sense of it all. And so, kind of what I said on Friday with Justin is like, I'm just sort of honestly trying to like, almost like reset expectations and just say, you know what, I've enjoyed like the game by game of what we saw to end the season. And I haven't mentioned Giannis yet, but obviously all that began with Giannis. Giannis looking like, a guy that wanted to be in that best player in the world conversation and prove that, he may not win MVP, but I think he's still right there in terms of what he's capable of delivering and how he can carry a team. And so I'm sure the Pacers feel a lot more concerned about, a series in which Giannis is healthy and Dame is the question mark than, going to a series like last year where Giannis was out and Dame was the healthy one, which, lasted all of like a game and a half. Yeah. So yeah, it's hard to say, right? I mean, I think if you just anchor on, you think back to the expectations when Dame arrived, right, that this was going to be a title contender and like, them in Boston, right, or the top 2 clear top teams in the East, and you see where they are now, it's like, geez, like that's tough.
Yeah.
But as we've talked about, right, like you never know what's going to happen. You just gotta kind of appreciate what you have when you have it. And right now you still have Giannis, so you still have Giannis. You have a team that I think has gotten to a level of comfort in terms of how they play around him and the guys that are able to, complement him and play with him. And it's not the guys we necessarily expected at the beginning of the year. But I think you definitely have a chance to win this first round playoff series.
Absolutely.
Even without Dame. And, it'd be easier if you had home court, but you don't. And so, now you just need to kind of play the hand that you've been dealt and hope that these guys that were showing out late in the year can do it at this next level, right? Which I think to me is the biggest question is, you're asking a bunch of guys that have not done anything at the playoff level to really deliver, right?
Yeah.
AJ Green didn't make any impact last year in his playoff debut. Kevin Porter Jr. I don't think has ever played in the playoffs before this year. Kuzma had won a championship, but you go back and look at his numbers during that championship, like he obviously was not like expected to be a third banana or anything like that there, which probably we shouldn't think of him that way now either.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's a group that hasn't done this together. But you also have guys that have won a championship together. I don't think Pat Connaughton's necessarily going to factor in, even to today's game notwithstanding. But I am really curious just to see what Giannis, Bobby, Brooke can do, given that those guys have been to war and come out on the other side together. And so I think, those three are crucial in kind of different ways. And I will say this, we'll talk about it more this week. I think this is a Bobby Portis series more than a Brooke Lopez series.
Ooh, yes.
I think the way that the Pacers play, I think is going to mean probably the Bucks have to. I think they're going to. My guess would be we'll see a lot of like Bobby Portis closing over Brooke, and part of that's the pace, and I think just the kind of size factor here. Like I don't think being big and playing drop is going to be as important as being kind of more flexible, playing zone, etc.
Yeah, being mobile.
And so Bobby's playoff history has been pretty up and down, and let's just say this is a great series for really all of those guys too. Like Brooke's still gonna play, like, and he's had some great offensive series, including last year. He's generally always been good offensively. It's just defensively, some of these series don't always kind of break his way. So so I'm excited for it, and
I am too. I'm really excited.
I've got the over/under on KPJ technicals at 2.5 in the series. The ejections, I'll say the ejections at 0.5. So these teams there's no shortage of history with these teams.
I know that's right.
I think there's going to be some fireworks, maybe not always the best basketball, but there's definitely going to be some fireworks between these two teams. And, I think for the sake of the Bucks, I hope it's competitive. I don't think the Bucks are going to stomp them. And I hope the Bucks show that, these last, 2-3 weeks here aren't a fluke and that, they're ready to play, because the Pacers have also been racking up wins here.
Yes, they have. Yes, they have. I think the phrasing that you said that I would love to highlight and kind of use that to frame the week ahead on Locked On Bucks while previewing that series is just resetting expectations of what we expect from this team going forward. But it is a very winnable series here that they have against the Pacers. It's not going to be easy, but it is winnable, and it is going to be really fun breaking that down. We'll, of course, be talking more about that Pacers-Bucks playoff series. There will be a crossover episode with Tony East from Locked On Pacers at some point this week, but gear up, y'all, for a full week here of getting ready for Bucks Pacers. So make sure you guys keep it tuned in on Locked On Bucks, and for Frank and myself, we'll catch you guys later.